Good Thursday morning to you. Welcome back to Kelly's Corner. It is Thursday, September the 11th of 2025. And as you might have guessed or might have imagined, the majority of this episode is going to focus on the tragic events of another September the 11th. September the 11th of 2001. 24 years ago today. 24 Septembers ago. It was one of those days that if you lived through it, if you were alive, you know exactly where you were, exactly what you were doing when you heard the news of the terrorist attacks 24 years ago today. And I remember. I was in the 10th grade at Trinity Christian Academy. I was in second hour. I just happened to have Spanish 2 second hour that year. And we were sitting in groups working on some classwork, some handout sheets. And another student came in and told us that they were down in the library watching the news because a plane had gone into the World Trade Center. And spent most of the rest of the morning in the library with the high school, watching as events unfolded and things began to happen. And ironically enough, that student that came in and told my class of the tragic events that day actually became a police officer for our city police force. Whether or not it was because of the events of that day, I don't know, but he is currently serving on the police department here in the city that I live, and I'm thankful for him and others who serve and protect us, whether it be law enforcement or even the fire department and the military and anyone in public service. Greatly appreciate them and all that they do for us and to keep us safe. I don't know how it is where you are, but in Alabama today, it's a sunny day. It's a hot day. The sun is shining, and I can't help but think that that day 24 years ago, that Tuesday morning, how clear and blue the sky was in New York, much like it is here in Alabama today. But on that day, there was a series of coordinated suicide attacks that occurred in this country, and it killed 2,996 people. Many of them were Americans. They were not all Americans. Some were citizens of other countries. But almost 3,000 people lost their lives that day. Innocent people lost their lives that day. These terrorists hijacked 4 aircrafts. There were 19 members of the terrorist organization Al-Qaeda. And 2 of the aircrafts that were hijacked crashed into the World Trade Center in New York, both towers. A 3rd crashed into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. And then the 4th crashed into a field in near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The attacks not only killed almost 3,000 people, but it injured over 6,000 others and caused at least $10 billion in infrastructure and property damage. And as a result of the terrorist attacks and the ultimate cleanup and issues related to that, there have been many other people that have died in post 9/11 due to related cancers and respiratory diseases following those attacks. The 4 flights that day that were hijacked, the first was American Flight 11. It was a Boeing 767 aircraft, and it departed out of Logan Airport in Boston at 7:59. It was en route to Los Angeles with a crew of 11 people and 76 passengers. Those 76 passengers do not include the 5 hijackers. The hijackers, once they hijacked the plane, they flew the plane into the North Tower of World Trade Center. They flew into the north facade of that building at 8:46 a.m. Eastern Time. The second plane was United Airlines Flight 175. It was also a Boeing aircraft, 767, and it departed Logan Airport at 8:14 a.m. It was also en route to Los Angeles. It had a crew of 9 people and 51 passengers. Again, not including the 5 terrorists. The hijackers, once they hijacked the plane, they flew it into the southern facade of the South Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City at 9:03 a.m. Then there was American Flight 77. It was a Boeing 757 aircraft. It departed out of Washington Dulles International Airport at 8:20 a.m. It was en route to Los Angeles with a crew of 6 passengers, six crew members, and 53 passengers, not including the hijackers. There were 5 of them. The hijackers flew the plane into the western facade of the Pentagon at Arlington County, Virginia at 9:37 a.m. Something interesting about the Pentagon that day, and I learned this on a tour of the Pentagon a couple of years ago. During much of 2001, the Pentagon was undergoing some renovations, and it just so happened that on that September day, September 11th, 2001, the portion of the building that this plane struck, that Flight 77 struck, was the portion of the building that was undergoing renovations at that particular time. And had it not been for that, there would have been many, many, many others lives lost. But because of the renovations, they had relocated those workers and many of those workers, not all of them, but many of those workers into a different part of the building. And so there were lives lost in the Pentagon that day, not just on the plane, but actually in the Pentagon workers. But the number could have been a lot higher had they not been doing renovations. And finally, the 4th plane was United Airlines Flight 93. It was a Boeing 757. It departed out of Newark International Airport at 8:42 en route to San Francisco. It had a crew of 7 people and 33 passengers, not including the 4 hijackers that were on that plane. Flight 93 was different. The passengers on that plane, because it had taken off late, they had received word from family members through a variety of telephone calls. There were many calls made from Flight 93 that day, but they had received word from their family members, relatives, and people that they had called that of the events going on in New York. And so because they knew what was going on, they accurately realized that they were part of something much larger, and then that plane was not going to land safely. And so because of this, the passengers of Flight 93 devised a plan that they were going to attack the hijackers. They were going to subdue them, and hopefully be able to retake the airplane. Unfortunately, they were not able to do that just before, during the attack of the hijackers by the crew and the the passengers. The hijackers realized they were not going to make their intended target, which is believed to be the U.S. Capitol. They realized they weren't going to make it, and so to prevent the passengers from retaking the plane, they decided to crash the airplane. And so the hijackers crashed the airplane into a field in Stony Creek Township near Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. And because of their bravery, these brave men and women saved countless lives in Washington, D.C. and at the Capitol building. And they were the first martyrs in the war on terror, the war on terrorism, because they found out what was happening and they fought back. They knew it might cost them their lives, but it wasn't going to cost any other innocent people's lives. May we never forget the events of this day 24 years ago. But most importantly, may we not forget the innocent people who lost their lives, who just showed up for work, who were going on vacation, who were going back home, who were flying to work. They were innocent. They didn't deserve to be part of a historic day like this, to be part of such a tragedy. But they are, and they were. And their names were read this morning in New York City. They were memorialized at the Pentagon. They were memorialized and read out loud in that field at Shanksville, Pennsylvania, at the Flight 93 National Memorial. Just like they are every year. And they'll never be forgotten. Nearly all of the people that perished that day were civilians. They were office workers. They were regular people just like you and me. The exception to that is that 343 firefighters lost their lives that day. 60 law enforcement officers lost their lives that day. 8 EMS and 55 military personnel across the 4 crash sites. These almost 3,000 people were real people. They had real lives. They had family and friends that loved them, just like we do. Every one of them had plans and goals. They had hopes and dreams. When I get off work this afternoon, I'm leaving and going to a concert. I don't know. Maybe somebody in one of the World Trade Centers, after they were getting off, were going to go to a concert too, or a movie, or to dinner with their family or some of their friends. They had plans, just like we do. Many of them made their way to work that day by car or some other form of public transportation. Some of them were going to work out of town via an airport, an airplane, and they never made their intended destination. All of these people were unaware that their lives were about to be forever altered. I want to emphasize that they were real people, just like you and me. And they didn't deserve what happened to them that day. I want to take a few minutes and mention some names of the people on the flights at the crash sites. There's no way I'm going to be able to discuss all 3,000. So I just picked a handful of people at random. And again, this is in no way every single person. It's a very small ratio of people. Again, just a handful. And it's not meant to say that these people are more important or the others are less important. It's just a way to remember that they were real people and they mattered. On Flight 11, you had the pilot, John Ognowski, flight attendants Betty Ong, Madeline Sweeney. You had Frasier creator and executive producer David Angel. Seth MacFarlane had scheduled to be on that flight, but overslept due to a hangover and had arrived too late at the airport. He was the creator or something important to do with Family Guy. But there were many stories that day that people barely missed their flights or barely made their flights or barely made it to work or had something get in their way and they couldn't go to work to alter the course of their history. You had people who stopped at the drugstore because they wore new shoes and it rubbed a blister, so they needed to get some Band-Aids or something to cushion the blister so it wouldn't get any worse. Then you had someone whose child was starting school, their first day of kindergarten, and so they were going to be late for work to take their kid to school. Whether it's traffic or stopping to buy some donuts or coffee or any little minute thing, that God allowed to happen, so that they wouldn't be there. At the time, it probably seemed like an inconvenience to them, but looking back, I'm sure it was probably their greatest blessing because it meant they weren't there that day. In a way, I guess they cheated death. But many stories like that of people oversleeping or any little thing that happens, but it kept them, one little routine change made the difference between life and death. And, whether you were trying to escape the building, maybe something as little as whether you went left or right determined whether you lived or died. Just something very small that seems, so insignificant made such a big deal and such a huge impact that day. You have Paige Farley Hackle, who was a godmother. She was a passenger on Flight 11, and she was going to meet her goddaughter and the goddaughter's mother in Disneyland for a trip. We'll revisit that again in a little bit. And then Jacqueline and Robert Norton, they were traveling to California for their son's wedding. Just regular people, just like us. In the North Tower, you have Thomas Ashton. It was his second day on the job at the North Tower as an electrician's apprentice. He was on the 95th floor, his second day. Paul Battaglia, he worked for Marsh McLennan on the 100th floor. Richard Cagneo worked for Cantor Fitzgerald on the 104th floor. Thomas McGinnis on the 92nd floor. He was a commodities broker with Cars Futures. Deborah Merrick worked for the Port Authority of New York. Christian Santiago worked for Insurance Overload Systems. Jackie Young, worked for Marsh McLennan as well. Paul DiMartini and Pablo Ortiz were Port Authority employees, and they're remembered for helping others escape, but they themselves did not. No one above the impact zone in the North Tower survived. No one was able to escape because the impact blocked all the stairways. So they couldn't, if you were above the impact zone, you had no way out. Janelle Guzman McMillan was trapped for 27 hours in the rubble, and she was the last person pulled from ground zero, from the wreckage, alive. And she worked on the 64th floor of the North Tower, but she survived. She was one of the 20-something people that was pulled out of the wreckage, the rubble, the remains of the buildings after the towers fell. By and large, just based on numbers, more people died in the North Tower than the other tower, than the South Tower, or the Pentagon, or even Flight 93, even the field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The North Tower had more casualties than any of them. But Janelle Guzman McMillan was a survivor and a positive outcome. Flight 175, Victor Sarancini was the captain. And then you had passenger Ruth Ann McCourt and her 4-year-old daughter Juliana McCourt. They were traveling to Disneyland to meet Juliana's godmother, the one I mentioned on Flight 11. Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower. Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower. Ironically, Ruth Ann McCourt's brother was on the World Trade Center site at the hotel in between the World Trade Centers. His name escapes me at the moment. But he just happened to be tending to a lady who had gotten injured after the first plane hit the tower, the North Tower. He was tending to her and trying to comfort her. She was burned very badly, and he had found out she was Catholic. And so he suggested that the two of them say the Lord's Prayer together. And it just so happened that they were saying the Lord's Prayer when his sister's plane flew into the South Tower. Christine Lee Hansen was 2.5. She was the youngest of 8 children that died that day. She was traveling with her parents, Peter and Sue Kim Hansen, to go to California to go to Disneyland on vacation. Hockey scout Garnett Bailey was on Flight 175 as well. And then Brian Sweeney left a famous voicemail for his wife, who was a teacher, letting her know that he loved her and wanted her to do good. Those are just some of the people whose lives were taken on Flight 175. In the South Tower, which is the tower that Flight 175 hit, you have Wells Crowther. He was an equities trader, and he was credited with saving at least 18 lives. And he became known as the man in the red bandana. And people described him as, wow, I was helped by the man with the red bandana. And his family had wondered about him, if what he did after the planes hit. Did he try to help people out? Did he try to get out? And they just happened to be watching a news program one year on the terrorist attacks, and somebody on that news program mentioned that they were helped by a man with a red bandana. He had worn a red bandana since he was a small child, and so they knew in their hearts that this lady was helped by their son. And so they somehow eventually got together, and it was confirmed that their son was the one that helped these people out. But he was credited with saving at least 18 lives that day. Then you had Rick Rescorla. He was a securities director for Morgan Stanley. And he, after the 93 attacks of the World Trade Center, He predicted that terrorists were going to come back, and that the next time they came, they were going to come by air. The first time they came via a car bomb in the basement of the World Trade Center. He predicted that when they came back, they would come by air. And so, as director of security, he devised escape routes and plans, and then had his people practice 4 times a year, every single year, of what to do if something were to happen and they needed to evacuate. And so 4 times a year, his people went down the stairs all the way to the bottom, and as practice, as a drill. And so on September the 11th, they were prepared. They knew what to do. And I believe every single person from Morgan Stanley, every single employee made it out. If not, it was a very small number that did not. But Rick Rescorla, after he got all of his people out, he told one of the workers, one of his friends, that he was going to go up and make one more sweep and make sure all of their people got out, and then he would get out. But unfortunately, the building collapsed before he made it out. So he lost his life, but he's credited with saving the lives of, I believe it was 1,600 employees that Morgan Stanley had. But he died saving others. You have Oreo Palmer, who went into the South Tower. He was the New York Fire Department battalion chief, one of them, and he led a team to the 78th floor, and he was killed trying to help others escape and get out of the building. But there are survivor stories like Brian Clark and Stanley Pramnith. Stanley, after the first building was hit, had actually started evacuating, and then was told to go back up to his office because their building was secure. And so he went back and actually watched the plane crash into the building. And after the plane crashed, he was trapped. Brian Clark was working his way out of the building, and he just happened to hear Stanley screaming for help. And so he helped get Stanley over the rubble and untrap him. And they made it down together. And to this day, they're still friends. Blood brothers for life is what they said that day. Ronald DeFrancesco was the last known person to escape the South Tower before it collapsed on September the 11th of 2001. And it was hit after the North Tower, but the South Tower actually fell first. On Flight 77, you have Barbara Olson, who was a lawyer, and her husband was the former Solicitor General of the United States. You had 3 11-year-olds and their chaperones. They were going to the National Geographic Society contest. They had won a contest. They had won an educational trip with the National Geographic, and they were going on a trip to California for that. There were 2 National Geographic Society staff members that were with them, as well as other chaperones. And among the kids was a little girl named Asia Cottom and a little boy named Rodney Dickens. You had Dr. Paul Ambrose and Todd Rubin, who was an attorney. At the Pentagon, you had workers killed there. Carrie Blackburn, Donna Bowen, Sharon Carver, Julian Cooper, Lieutenant Colonel Jerry Dickerson, Sandra Foster, Lieutenant Michael LaManna, Teresa Martin, and Major Dwayne Williams. And I had to include him because he's actually born and raised in the county that I live in. He born and raised in the city that I went to college. Got my bachelor's degree and my first master's from, Jacksonville, Alabama. So he was a local connection to the terrorist attacks. And he's actually buried in the Jacksonville City Cemetery. He has a very nice grave there. And his mother used to visit every single year. I think she passed away a couple of years ago. I know she'd been sick. I think she'd had Alzheimer's or something similar, dementia maybe. But I think she passed away a couple of years ago. And then finally, on Flight 93, you had Christian Adams, Todd Beamer, who was a personal hero of mine. He had called Verizon operator Lisa Jefferson and spoken to her on the phone. And she said the Lord's Prayer with him right before they attacked the hijackers and tried to take the plane back. And she remembered that he called out his famous saying, and it kind of became a battle cry there for a while. And I still say it to this day, let's roll. You had Mark Bingham, Dior Francis Bodley, who was the youngest person on board Flight 93. You had Tom Burnett, Patricia Cushing, Patrick Driscoll, Jeremy Glick, Lauren Grancolis, and her unborn child, Hilda Marson, who was the oldest person on board, Mark Rosenberg, Honor Elizabeth Wainio, and Deborah Welsh. These were just regular people. Every single one of them. On their minds that day were probably things similar that go through our minds throughout the day. Well, when I get home, I've got to do this, and when I get home, I've got to do that, and I've got to make this for dinner, and I've got to do that, and this needs washed, and the kids have this school project due, things like that. Things they had to get done. Just like ours. These heroes had no idea that their lives were going to be forever changed that day. Just like we don't know when our last day on earth is going to be. Because of that, because time is fleeting, it's imperative that we know for certain and for sure where we're going to spend eternity if today's our last day. They didn't wake up planning to die. They didn't wake up planning to be part of history, but it happened. I'm sure some of them were prepared. I know some of them were prepared. And unfortunately, I'm sure some of them weren't. But we've got to be. Because just like they had no idea, we have no idea when our time's going to be up. Yesterday, another tragedy took place in this nation at a college campus in Utah, in Orem, Utah. Utah Valley University, I think was the name of it. Political activist, Republican commentator, conservative commentator. Charlie Kirk was brutally and heinously murdered in front of a couple of thousand college students at a rally yesterday. As of today, his suspect is still not been captured. The issue isn't a gun issue. It's a hate issue. And when you resort to violence over someone having a different belief system than you, whether it's political or religious, or even they cheer for a different football team than you, that's a problem, and it's not right. All Charlie Kirk did was stand up and speak. He used his voice. He didn't use his voice in anger. I've listened to him for years, and I've not once heard him even raise his voice. And he would tell you, if you disagreed with him, come to the front of the line. Let's have a discussion. He spoke. He spoke with kindness. And he didn't deserve what happened to him yesterday. His wife and young children didn't deserve what happened to him yesterday. Those 2 kids will grow up without a father. They're 3 years old and 1 year old. The 3-year-old might, but the 1-year-old won't, for sure, have any memories of their dad. They don't deserve that. America has got to do better. We've got to be better. If not, we're not any different than those people the terrorists that crashed the planes into the buildings and the field. Charlie Kirk was also a Christian, and he publicly spoke of his faith. And I have no doubt in my mind that when that bullet struck him in the neck, he opened his eyes and saw Jesus. And there's comfort in that. He didn't wake up yesterday planning to die, but he was ready. Again, just like we have to be. We have to be ready. And I didn't mean for this to be a political discourse. I didn't mean for this to be all doom and gloom and that, because it's a beautiful Thursday morning. It's another day of life God has given us. Do something productive with it. Do something nice for somebody. Make a difference in the world. There's a song that my favorite group, the Oak Ridge Boys, sing, and it's called Did I Make a Difference? And it talks about when you get to the end of your life, are you going to have to ask yourself, did I make a difference? Or are you going to know that you did? I don't want to have to ask myself if I made a difference. I want to know. I want to leave the world a better place. I want to impact lives, not just for here, but for something greater, for eternity. I don't want there to be any doubt at the end of my life where I stood on the issues. I don't want there to be any doubt at the end of my life where I am. Because I know that my home is in heaven, and I know that my future is secure. Because there was a day that I repented of my sin, and I admitted that I was a sinner in desperate need of a Savior, and I put my full faith and trust in Jesus. And I hope you can say the same. And if you can't, I urge you to make today that day. Turn September 11th into something good. Remember it for something good. Remember it as the day that you gave your life to Jesus. I mentioned my favorite group, the Oak Ridge Boys, and I mentioned earlier in the show that I was going to a concert this afternoon after I get off, and you guessed it, I'm going to see them. Looking forward to it. I'm actually seeing them today and tomorrow in 2 different venues at 2 different places. I wasn't going to the show today, which is actually closer to my home, but because I had already planned to go tomorrow, but then I had a friend guilt me into going this evening, so I'm going to actually see them twice, 2 days in a row, and very much looking forward to it. But I need to get some things done before that, so I'm going to hop off here. Just wanted to share a few thoughts, a few remembrances. Pray for our nation. Pray for each other. And remember that no matter whether you agree with somebody or not, violence is not the answer. Hatred is not the answer. We're all made by God. We're all loved by God. Let's pray for each other. Pray for our country. And it's going to be okay. I hope you have a great day, whatever day you listen to this on. Hope you have a great day, and God bless.